Florentia, a bestial version who falls in love with Caesar but thwarted by Metella, who takes her to Lesbos bound in chains. It failed, like many other of Marston's ventures up to this point, but didn't stop him from the opportunities arose, even the most morbid ones. When Charles Lindbergh's baby was kidnapped on March 1st, 1932, Marston offered his services in the use of the lie detector, but it was ignored, while Keeler received his patent on his polygraph machine the previous year and was selling it to police departments. Marston was trying to make the claim that he was the leading psychologist on deception, but was eclipsed by Keeler. Marston tried to use his lie detector on Bruno Hauptmann, who had been arrested in 1934 for the kidnapping, who Keeler wanted to use his polygraph on as well. His attorney claimed he never heard of Marston, and Hauptmann was found guilty and died by the electric chair on April 3, 1936. On March 10, 1936, Marston published the book The Lie Detector Test, claiming that Keeler's polygraph didn't work and only humans could detect lies. He even sent a copy to the FBI director, J. Edgar Hoover, for an endorsement, but instead, Hoover just opened a file on Marston. At this point, Marston's ego was getting the better of him, claiming he was the only real lie detector, completely misinterpreting the Frye ruling, which closed the case in the use of his machine in legal proceedings. Marston would even claim it was a love detector, and would frequently use it in publicity stunts. Sadie had another daughter on February 22, 1933, whom they would name Olive. They were truly becoming one big family, with William and Sadie eventually adopted Olive's children on February of 1935 to kill the Guys, using the cover that they were the children of her dead husband. The one person who saw through the Guys was Jack Byrne, Olive's brother and pulp writer, who never trusted Marston. Moving back to Massachusetts, Sadie went to work at Metro Life Insurance, while the family moved into William's boyhood home on Avon Street in Cliftondale with his mother, his father having died back in 1923. In the summer of 1935, they moved on to Rye, New York, where Olive got a job as a staff writer at the Family Circle, a woman's magazine, back in 1932. Her aunt, Margaret Sanger, would visit from time to time. On November 1st, 1935, Byrne wrote an article under the name Olive Richard about William Marston, hiding the fact of their relationship while proclaiming her love for him and his work. She even wrote about her brother, Jack, along with her love of pulp writing. Meanwhile, while his wife and girlfriend were earning a living, Marston was up to his usual antics. On November 10, 1931, Marston held a press conference at the Harvard Club in New York City. For a 2-hour speech, he predicted that women would one day rule the world in about 1,000 years, something his Olive's aunt, Margaret Sanger, would agree to. On November 21, 1938, Marston's lie detector emerged again, and of all things, a Gillette ad for their razors, claiming that the machine proved that customers like Gillette over all other brands. However, when the Detroit police tried to replicate the experiment, it failed. Then he decided to try his hand at writing again, and soon became intrigued by the new medium starting to rise: comic books. In March 1940, the publisher Jack Byrne worked for Fiction House published Amazonia, the Mighty Woman, about the last survivor of a super race that perished during the Ice Age. She is eventually rescued and falls in love with Blake Manners, an explorer on the polar expedition. Marston was interested in stories like this, especially when they appealed to his feminist nature and believed comic books could provide good wish fulfillment. Once again peddling his credentials as a psychologist, he was hired by Charles Gaines for his editorial board at All American Comics. While there, he convinced Gaines of the need of a female superhero to serve as a role model for young girls, though Gaines resisted at first since all previous attempts had failed. Nevertheless, Marston persisted, and on February 1941, he submitted Suprema, the Wonder Woman, to Gaines. Working under his editor Sheldon Meyer, who made Marston cut Suprema and just call her Wonder Woman, he was paired with artist Harry G. Peter to craft the book. Peter was born on March 8, 1880 in San Rafael, California. He started his professional career as a staff artist for the San Francisco Chronicle in 1906, where he met Adonica Fulton, a fellow artist for the Bulletin, who eventually became his wife in 1912. Like Marston, Peter had feminist leanings, doing suffrage art for the Modern Woman feature in The Judge. Together, they would craft the most successful female superhero of all time. She would not be the first female superhero, though, as June Tarp Mills, a Pratt Institute-educated artist, had been producing Black Fury and later Miss Fury since April 6, 1941 in a Sunday strip for the Bell Syndicate, before being reprinted in the comic book form by Timely, later Marvel, from 1942 to 1946. Even better, June operated under the pseudonym Tarp Mills to disguise the fact that she was also a female comic book artist to boot. Her comic was about a wealthy socialite, Marla Drake, who donned a skin-tight catsuit to fight crime. While popular, the strip garnered controversy with Marla's ever-revealing outfits, at one point wearing a bikini of all things in 1947, which led to 37 papers to drop the strip. Something her more successful counterpart would soon suffer as well. In crafting their own costume for Wonder Woman, H.G. Peter was inspired by Captain America, but he wanted her to be sexy, with a look based on Alberto Vargas' Varga Girl in the July 1942 Esquire magazine, which was later declared obscene in 1943. Marston also made a decision to write under the pseudonym Charles Moulton, which was a combination of his and Bill Gaines' middle names. In his story, Amazons are a race superior to men who have been freed by the Greek goddess of love Aphrodite to live in peace on Paradise Island. Diana was formed from clay by her mother, Hippolyta, and lived in peace with her fellow Amazons until she was rescued by war pilot Steve Trevor, who had crash-landed there. The Amazons hold a tournament to see who would have the honor of returning Steve Trevor to his country, while Diana wins and has a costume fashioned in American colors of red, white, and blue in honor of the country by Hippolyta. Diana would go on to America with Trevor, whom she had now fallen in love with, and adopts his country as her own, standing up for the principles of democracy and freedom. She also states that she does not kill, as it goes against the original Amazonian principles. On October of 1941, Wonder Woman debuted in All-Star Comics number 8, right when World War II was about to break out. Marston appealed to FDR for service in the use of his lie detector, but was once again passed over by Leonard Keeler and his polygraph, which soon became a standard test for anyone seeking security clearance in the U.S. military. Despite the fact that the National Research Council concluded in early 1941 that it didn't actually detect deception. Instead, Marsden focused back on Wonder Woman, who in Sensation Comics number 2 on January 1942, she fought gangsters while debuting her Invisible Plane, along with one of her villains, Dr. Poison, who was working for the Nazis. Wonder Woman was instantly patriotic during World War II. Etta Candy was also introduced in the issue as Wonder Woman's best friend, and notable for the time for being a plus-size woman compared to the stick-figure women of comic books. However, she was also brave and capable, and held her own during Diana's adventures despite just being a human. Diana also took up the alter ego of a nurse at first at the military base where Steve Trevor is stationed to keep an eye on him. Later, she would become a secretary for military intelligence, with her bosses noting how fast of a typist she was. This was a tribute to Olive Byrne, who was also a fast typist and even worked on Marston's early scripts. On March of 1941, the National Organization of Decent Literature put Sensation Comics on the blacklist. Founded by Catholic bishops in 1938, it called comic books the disgrace of the 20th century, and with Wonder Woman because she was not sufficiently dressed. This didn't deter sales, which were exceptional, and Wonder Woman was quickly becoming one of the most popular characters on the stands. Soon she was making guest appearances in All-Star Comics, teaming up with the Justice Society of America in issues number 8 and number 11. Then in Sensation Comics number 5, the readers were polled over who should join the JSA next. Wonder Woman, Wildcat, Mr. Terrific, the Black Tyrant, and the Gay Ghost. Yes, that was his name. And also Little Boy Blue, not the painting, an actual superhero. Wonder Woman won. On March 1942, the votes were tabulated, with Wonder Woman easily winning, though with a rigged results. Wonder Woman's picture is twice as large as the other characters, and appears multiple times on the voting page. Meanwhile, Gaines hired noted child psychologist Loretta Bender to help counter the comic book Wonder Woman critics, who in 1941 had written a journal article with a medical resident, Reginald Laurie, called The Effects of Comic Books on the Ideology of Children, in which he concluded that comics were actually good for children, outside of being dominated by men. With this and the huge sales of Wonder Woman, whenever she appeared in the comics, Gaines was finally ready to add her to the JSA, but wanted to conduct one more poll. In All-Star Comics number 11, he asked readers directly if Wonder Woman should be allowed to join the JSA. 1,801 votes were tabulated, and it was overwhelmingly yes. Broken down by gender, 1,265 boys voted yes, along with 333 girls, while 197 boys voted no, and just 6 girls. Thus, Wonder Woman finally got to join the premier superhero team in comic books at the time in All-Star Comics in the August-September issue, as the secretary. Marsden was incensed, as he thought Wonder Woman should be an equal member on the team and not left behind to do the paperwork, complaining to Sheldon Meyer on April of 1942. This was rather Gardner Fox's idea, who not only made her the secretary but virtually helpless, wishing the men luck as they went off to war or fretting over the Lost Minutes book. Meanwhile, When Marston was writing the character, she was flying off in space in a rocket while mixing in with more contemporary stories, such as battling a corrupt milk company that was tied to a larger Nazi plot. Then in Sensation Comics number 8, she fights with a union for underpaid women at Bullfinch's department stores. When she confronts the company owner, Gloria Bullfinch, she uses her lasso to hypnotize her. At the time, it could control minds over just revealing the truth, telling her name is now Ruth Smith and must work at her own Bullfinch department stores. However, she soon learns the real villain is Bullfinch's fiancé, Prince Gyolgi del Slimo. That's a name. And when Gloria awakens, she punches him out, wishing she was as strong as Wonder Woman. Bullfinch then doubles the salaries of her workers in response. Then, in September 1942, Sensation Comics, Wonder Woman donned the identity of a look-alike whose husband didn't want her to work and even changed her to stay home. It was part of Marston's larger belief, which he wrote in an article for Tomorrow magazine in that same year, that women should be allowed to work as much as men, and later, in Pivot of Civilization, argued that only for the future was greater equality for women. On May 1942, the Women's Auxiliary Corps was formed, WAAC or WAC, was formed to help with the war effort. The intention wasn't to give women a combat role, but for them to take up the non-combat duties, thus freeing men for combat. 150,000 women signed up to serve, with Wonder Woman comic joining in the war effort, promoting it in the Sensation Comics number 20. It was criticized by feminists such as Sanger for the practice of dismissing recruits who got pregnant, but it was a large step at the time. On July 1942, Wonder Woman finally got her own comic book, the first for a female superhero, at which point Marston dropped his pseudonym and revealed that it was William Moulton Marston, that was the writer and creator all along with debuting new villains, such as Ares, the Greek god of war. He even sent an issue to his mother, who reportedly liked it, but didn't approve of her costume. Moms. She did like the Miss Marvel feature, though. This was the Wonder Woman of history, which highlighted the great women of history. It was inspired by Alice Marvel, the top-ranked female tennis player at the time and multiple U.S. Open champion, who met with Bill Gaines about doing a feature. Gaines hired her as an associate editor, put her photo in the first issue of Wonder Woman, and paid her $50,000 for the job. Each installment highlighted a different woman, such as Florence Nightingale or Clara Barton, with Marvel doing a poll for readers to decide who should be the feature for the next issue. She no doubt about getting plenty of responses, as by the third issue, Wonder Woman was selling 500,000 issues a month. Sadly, her involvement didn't go much farther than that. Marvel was married to an army captain in 1942, and when she was 5 months pregnant in 1944, she was struck by a drunk driver and lost her baby. Soon afterward, she got word her husband had been killed in a plane crash in Germany. By 1945, she had left the country to serve the U.S. as a spy in Switzerland. The feature would continue, though, with it eventually being collected for distribution in schools. Of course, Wonder Woman comic book kept up with the comic tropes, introducing villains like Dr. Psycho in issue number 5 on July of 1943, his tribute to the late Dr. Hunsenberg, and the Cheetah in issue number 6 of October of 1943, though she didn't possess superpowers at the time till after the Crisis of Infinite Earth miniseries in the 1980s. Giganta later appeared in issue number 9 in the summer of 1944, leading to further increased Wonder Woman's rogue gallery. The person who probably wrote those actual Wonder Woman in history articles was Dorothy Rubinek, who would become National DC's first female editor. She is generally credited with creating Kryptonite for Superman in 1943, which first appeared on a radio show before the comic books, as she felt he needed a weakness. When she started working on Wonder Woman, Rubiek immediately clashed with Marston about the persistent story device he kept using, bondage. In nearly every issue, Diana was chained or bound for one reason or another, only to free herself in the end. Rubinek found the imagery sexist and disturbing, but Marston argued that women enjoyed submission as long as they could free themselves in the end. He used the bondage symbolic of men's oppression of women. It was often men who bound Wonder Woman, and her breaking free symbolic of women gaining equality. It was through these images that would lead to rumors that Marston engaged in the practice himself, especially when his living situation was revealed decades later. However, his son Byrne claimed that he never observed anything like that in their household and stated that neither Elizabeth nor Olive would have allowed it to begin with. Rubiek did mandate that Wonder Woman should stay off Paradise Island, keeping her in the real world as much as possible, just as Superman couldn't go back to Krypton either. Rubiek wanted her to be a female Superman as much as possible. She also wanted the sexiness of her look played down, which as a result led to her getting a miniskirt.